Good morning. Today I'm going to talk to you about protein synthesis, otherwise known as translation. Translation is the pathway of protein biosynthesis, or it is the process by which the ribosomes are able to convert the information which is carried by the mRNA into the synthesis of a new protein molecule. So protein synthesis occurs in the cytosol and it occurs on the ribosomes and is guided by the information which is carried by the mRNA molecule. Now, what are the basic requirements for translation? The basic requirements for translation is the mRNA molecule, the tRNA, the ribosomes on which protein synthesis occurs. We require energy in the form of ATP and GTP. We require specific enzymes and specific protein factors. What are the stages of eukaryotic translation? The stages of eukaryotic translation include the first stage is the activation of the amino acids. Then there are three important phases. They are initiation, elongation, and termination. So the same phases we saw in the case of replication, transcription, and now we see it in this translation also. The three important phases: initiation, elongation, and termination. Now, what is the activation of amino acids? The amino acids are brought by tRNA molecules, and the activation of amino acid means the attachment of the correct amino acid to the tRNA molecule. This is facilitated by an enzyme which is known as the aminoacyl tRNA synthetase. This enzyme catalyzes a two-step reaction, and this results in the binding of a specific amino acid to the tRNA molecule. This reaction requires ATP, and ATP is then hydrolyzed to form AMP and pyrophosphate. Now, the synthetase enzyme, that is the aminoacyl tRNA synthetase, is extremely specific in recognizing both the amino acid and the corresponding tRNA molecule. So here we see the reaction whereby the amino acid gets attached to the CCA arm of the tRNA molecule. So it gets attached to the 3' end, which carries the CCA arm of the tRNA molecule. This attachment of the amino acid to the tRNA molecule is facilitated by the enzyme aminoacyl tRNA synthetase and requires the hydrolysis of ATP to form AMP and pyrophosphate. The reaction is highly specific. The amino acid which gets directed to this specific tRNA molecule is the one which is highly specific and contributes to the high fidelity of translation. Now, before we go to initiation as such, we have a look at the ribosomes, which I told you is the factory in which the protein synthesis occurs. Now, what are these ribosomes? They are large complexes of proteins and ribosomal RNA. They usually consist of two subunits, a large subunit and a small subunit, depending upon its sedimentation coefficient or the Swedberg unit. In prokaryotes, the two subunits are 50S and 30S and forms the larger subunit, which is 70S, whereas in eukaryotes, they are 60S and 40S, forming the larger subunit, which is 80S. Now, the ribosomes carry RNA molecules. In prokaryotes, there are three species of RNA. We have the 5S RNA, the 23S RNA, and the 16S RNA. In eukaryotes, there are four species of RNA, which is the 5S RNA, the 28S RNA, the 5' RNA, and the 18S RNA. In addition, ribosomes also contain certain other proteins, and these proteins are greater in number in the case of eukaryotes. They help in maintaining the structure and function of the ribosomes. So here we see in this figure we see the structure of the ribosome molecule. As I told you, they are complexes of proteins and ribosomal RNAs. So in the case of prokaryotic ribosome, we find that there are two subunits, the 50S subunit and the 30S subunit, forming the larger subunit, which is 70S, three species of RNA, which is the 5S RNA, 23S RNA, and the 16S RNA. Eukaryotic ribosomes, larger than the prokaryotic ribosome, two subunits, 60S and 40S, comprising the larger subunit 80S, three species of RNA, the 5S RNA, the 5.8S RNA, the 28S RNA, and the 18S RNA. Now these ribosomes have three sites, the A site, the P site, and the E site. So these are the three binding sites which extend over both the subunits. The A and the P sites bind amino acyl tRNA, whereas the E site is known as the exit site, and it binds the tRNA which has discharged its amino acid, so it's known as the uncharged tRNA molecule. Now let's look at the first phase of initiation, that is the first phase of protein synthesis, which is initiation. Initiation can be divided into four different stages. First is the dissociation of the ribosomes. Second is the formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex. Thirdly, formation of the 48S pre-initiation complex. And fourthly, it forms the 80S initiation complex. So you have the reassociation of the 60 and 40S to form the 80S initiation complex. As I told you, ribosomes form the machinery on which the mRNA sequence is translated into the language of amino acids to form a specified protein molecule. The tRNA molecule are known as the adapters, which translates the codon which is present on the mRNA molecule into the amino acid sequence of proteins. So first stage of initiation, that is ribosomal dissociation, which you can see in this figure. We have the 80S ribosome dissociating to form the 60S ribosome and the 40S ribosome. So these are the two subunits which have been formed by dissociation. How is the reassociation between the 60S and 40S prevented? They are prevented by two factors, that is initiation factor 1A and initiation factor 3. Okay, so this is the first stage, ribosomal dissociation. 80S dissociates into its subunits 40S and 60S, and reassociation prevented by the attachment of initiation factor 3 and initiation factor 1A to the 40S subunit. Now let's look at the stage 2 of initiation, which is known as the formation of the 43S pre-initiation complex. So the two subunits have dissociated, 60S and 40S subunits have been formed, and the 40S subunit is being stabilized by initiation factor 3 and initiation factor 1A. Now again we have the involvement of energy in the form of GTP. GTP will now react with a third initiation factor. It is represented as small e IF2, that is eukaryotic initiation factor 2. Okay, so it binds to the eukaryotic initiation factor 2 to form a binary complex. GTP reacts with eukaryotic initiation factor to form a binary complex. This binary complex now reacts with methynyl tRNA, that is the tRNA which is going to start the process of initiation is known as the methynyl tRNA, which is going to specifically bind to the initiation codon AUG, which is present on the mRNA molecule. So when this binary complex binds with the methynyl tRNA, it forms a ternary complex. So this ternary complex then gets attached to the 40S ribosomes and forms the 43S pre-initiation complex. Okay, So we have the binary complex, which comprises the methynyl tRNA, initiation factor 2 and GTP. All these together then forms the ternary complex. Okay. So the binary complex is first formed by initiation factor 2 and GTP. This combines with the methynyl tRNA to form the ternary complex. The ternary complex now then binds to the ribosome, the 40S ribosomal unit, and this is facilitated by the euc initiation factor 2, as well as the eukaryotic initiation factor 1 also helps in the stabilization of this ternary complex onto the 40S ribosome, and this forms what is known as the 43S pre-initiation complex. Now the next step is that the mRNA has to enter onto the ribosomes. So the mRNA, the eukaryotic mRNA, which is present in the nucleus, will pass through the nuclear pore into the cytoplasm where you have the ribosomes. Now this mRNA molecule is a highly structured molecule, okay, and it is covered with polypeptides, and before translation it has to be activated by removing the secondary structures and proteins, particularly from the 5' end. So as you all know, the 5' end of the mRNA molecule is capped. And what is this cap? This cap is the 5-methyl guanylyl triphosphate cap. Now this cap is the one which is going to facilitate the binding of the mRNA to the 43S pre-initiation complex. And the cap binding protein has got another factor which is known as the eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. Okay, so how is this? So the secondary structures on the mRNA molecule has to be removed, and that is the process of activation of the mRNA molecule. And the 5' 5-methyl guanylyl triphosphate cap is now going to guide the mRNA molecule onto the ribosome, and this is also facilitated by the eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. So once the mRNA molecule enters the ribosome, the ribosome will then scan the mRNA molecule to recognize certain sequences which guides it to know that this is the site at which the process of translation should start. So the sequence of nucleotide base on the mRNA molecule which is going to be recognized by the ribosome is known as the Shine-Dalgarno sequence, and this facilitates the binding of the mRNA to the pre-initiation complex. In prokaryotes, this is known as the Kozak sequence. So this figure gives you an idea of how the 48S initiation complex is formed. So here we have the binding of mRNA to the 43S. So this is your 43S pre-initiation complex. The mRNA now goes and binds to this 43S pre-initiation complex to form the 48S initiation complex. Okay. Now this binding is helped by the a complex of proteins which is known as the eukaryotic initiation factor 4F. Now 4F is assisted by several other factors like 4G, 4A and 4E. So they can be considered as the assistants of 4F. Okay, so these assistants of 4F, they are the ones which guide the mRNA into the ribosomes. Now we come to the next stage, that is the reassociation of the 40S and 60S to form the ATS initiation complex. So this process requires the hydrolysis of GTP, and this reassociation is facilitated by eukaryotic initiation factor 5 with the hydrolysis of GTP. Along with this, we have the release of the original initiation factors, that is initiation factor 2, initiation factor 1A, and initiation factor 3. These factors are then recycled, and we have the association of 48 and S and 60S subunits to form the ATS ribosome. The methynyl tRNA is on P site, ready for elongation. So, once the mRNA has entered the ribosome has recognized the Kozak sequence in the case of the eukaryotes to guide it to the correct site on the mRNA molecule, so that the anticodon of the methynyl tRNA comes exactly opposite the codon of the mRNA molecule. That is the AUG codon of the mRNA molecule. When this happens, then we have the release of all these earlier initiation factors, that is initiation factor 1A, eukaryotic initiation factor 2, and eukaryotic initiation factor 3, all of them, and eukaryotic initiation factor 1, they are all released, and you have the reassociation of the 60S and the 40S subunit with the help of eukaryotic initiation factor 5. There is hydrolysis of GTP, and you have the formation of the ATS initiation complex. And in the next slide, we see that with the formation of the ATS large ribosomal subunit, you find that the methynyl tRNA has come into place exactly opposite the codon carrying the codon for methionine, that is AUG. So here you see this is the codon, start codon for translation, that is AUG, and the anticodon, this is the anticodon which is of methynyl tRNA UAC. So these have come and bound, the complementary bases have come and bound exactly at the initiation site, and this is the whole complex, the large subunit of the ribosome. They have got associated with each other, and the methynyl tRNA is now on the P site. I said there are 3 sites for the ribosome: the E site, the P site, and the A site. So this is known as the translational initiation complex. So the next phase of translation is elongation. Elongation is a cyclic process. Amino acids are added one at a time to the nascent peptide chain. The peptide sequence is determined by the order of codons in the mRNA molecule. These are catalyzed by several factors. So just like we have factors in initiation, the factors of elongation are called as the elongation factors. What are the steps of elongation? We have the binding of the amino acyl tRNA to the A site. We have peptide bond formation, and the third step is translocation. So let's look at these steps one by one. Now in the ATS ribosome, the A site is free for the attachment of the incoming amino acyl tRNA. Elongation factor 1A, which is represented as eukaryotic elongation factor 1A, it forms a complex with GTP and the incoming amino acyl tRNA. This permits the entry of the amino acyl tRNA at the A site. Now once the amino acyl tRNA gets bound to the A site, there is release of the eukaryotic elongation factor 1A, and GTP is hydrolyzed to form GDP and PI. Now once this new amino acid tRNA gets attached to the A site, there is a binding between the amino group of the incoming amino acyl tRNA and the COH group of the peptidyl tRNA which is present at the P site. So a peptide bond is formed with the help of peptidyl transferase, and this transfers this peptide to the P site, and this is brought about by this enzyme peptidyl transferase, which is an RNA enzyme. The 23S RNA acts as this enzyme, which is the peptidyl transferase. So the growing peptide chain will now get attached to the A site, and the amino acid, the tRNA which has discharged as amino acid, now moves from the P site to the exit site. Okay, so the tRNA from the P site gets discharged to the E site, the exit site, and then gets removed. Now the elongation factor 2 and GTP will now translocate the new peptidyl tRNA from the A site back to the P site with the hydrolysis of GTP to form GDP and PI, and the whole cycle is repeated. I will now explain with the figure. Okay, so this is your first amino acyl tRNA which is present in the P site. This may contain only your initial amino acid, that is methionine tRNA, but in this present figure you have a growing peptide chain. So this is present at the P site, and we have an incoming amino acyl tRNA which corresponds to the next codon which is present on the mRNA. So there is codon recognition, and the correct amino acyl tRNA is now going to bind to the A site, and I told you this binding is facilitated by the eukaryotic elongation factor 1A and GTP. Once this binding occurs, there is hydrolysis of GTP to form GDP and PI, and the elongation factor 1A then gets released, or it is recycled. Now once this new amino acid, which you can see as this flag here, acyl tRNA gets bound to the A site, there is a peptide bond formation between the COH group and the amino group. Okay, and this is facilitated by an enzyme, peptidyl transferase. So as this peptide bond is formed, this whole chain which is present on this amino acid gets transferred onto this amino acyl tRNA. Okay, so that is what is known as peptidyl transfer, helped by the enzyme peptidyl transferase. So now the whole chain has got shifted to the amino acyl tRNA on the A site because of this peptide bond formation between the chain which was present on the P site and the new amino acid which is present on this amino acyl tRNA on the A site. So now what you see here is that this tRNA has discharged its amino acid. So it is a free tRNA, and this tRNA will now move to the exit site and get removed. So here you see the new tRNA has moved to the exit site and has got discharged. Now what happens to the growing peptide chain which is attached to the tRNA on the A site? It cannot remain on the A site. It gets translocated back to the P site, and this is done with the help of the enzyme translocase and the elongation factor 2. There is hydrolysis of GTP to form GDP and PI. Okay, so this growing peptide chain has now got translocated to the P site. A site is now free to allow entry of a new amino acyl tRNA, and this cyclic process will then continue. So for how long does this continue? This continues until it recognizes the nonsense or terminating codon which appears at the A site. Now no tRNA with anticodon will recognize this terminating codon, but it is recognized by certain releasing factors. They recognize these terminating codons at the A site, and these releasing factors, with the help of GTP and peptidyl transferase, will now promote the hydrolysis of the peptide bond, and the tRNA gets released. So these releasing factors will release the peptide chain, and it will release the tRNA molecule, and it will dissociate the ATS ribosome, which is then recycled. So this figure gives you an idea of what happens during termination. During termination, there is the stop codon. The stop codon can be UAG, UAA or UGA. No, there is no corresponding aminoacyl tRNA for the stop codon. So it is not recognized by any aminoacyl tRNA, but it is recognized by a releasing factor. This releasing factor now gets attached to the stop codon with the help of GTP. Okay. Now when it gets attached, this eukaryotic releasing factor, the GTP and the peptidyl transferase, will now bring about the hydrolysis or the removal of this peptide chain. So this completed peptide chain gets released as a free polypeptide. The tRNA will now gets released. The ribosome now dissociates into its 60S and 40S subunits. Okay, so we have also the hydrolysis of GTP to form GDP and pyrophosphate. So this completes the process of translation, that is the release of the free polypeptide chain. Next topic is the inhibitors of protein synthesis. Let's look at what are the antibiotics which inhibit the process of translation. Now, the main inhibitors of protein synthesis, first we have the prokaryotic inhibitors like tetracyclines. They interact with the small ribosomal subunit, that is the 30S subunit of prokaryotes. They block the access of aminoacyl tRNA to the A site and prevents the formation of the mRNA ribosome complex. Another antibiotic which we use in prokaryotes is chloramphenicol. They bind to the 50S ribosomal subunit in prokaryotes. They inhibit the activity of peptidyl transferase, and in high levels they may also inhibit mitochondrial protein synthesis. A third antibiotic that we use is erythromycin in prokaryotes. They bind to the 50S ribosomal unit and it prevents translocation. Now there are certain other antibiotics that we can also use, like puromycin. They have a structural resemblance to aminoacyl tRNA and particularly tyrosinyl tRNA. It gets incorporated into the growing peptide chain and inhibits elongation in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Diphtheria toxin, it is inactivating eukaryotic elongation factor, that is eukaryotic elongation factor 2. It prevents translocation and inhibits further elongation in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Cycloheximide inhibits peptidyl transferase in the 60S ribosomal subunit of eukaryotes. So it is particularly inhibiting in eukaryotes. Ricin, an extremely toxin molecule which is present in castor bean, inactivates the 28S ribosomal RNA. So these are the main antibiotics, some of which are purely for prokaryotic protein synthesis, whereas some are both for inhibiting prokaryotic and eukaryotic translation, and some which are specific for only for eukaryotes. Now, there are certain modifications that occur post translation, and these are known as the post translational processing. So, many polypeptide chains are modified either while still attached to the ribosomes or after their synthesis has been completed. These modifications may include removal of part of the translated sequence, or it may include covalent additions of groups required for the biological activity of the protein molecule or its biological function. Now, what are these post-translation modifications? First is trimming. Many proteins are synthesized as large precursor molecules which are not functionally active. Now, portions of these proteins are removed by specialized proteases, which are endoproteases, and convert them into active molecules. So, we are familiar with examples of trypsinogen, which is present in the small intestine. When a certain fragment of the protein molecule is removed, they are converted to active trypsin. Similarly, we have chymotrypsinogen being converted to active chymotrypsin, pepsinogen being converted to active pepsin. So, synthesis of enzymes as inactive proteins protects the cell from being digested by its own products. Another way a process of trimming is we see in the case of hormones like insulin, which is synthesized as a large precursor. It can be a single chain precursor, which is known as the pre-hormone or the pre-prohormone. They are fragments of these chains, peptide chains are removed, and disulfide bridges are formed, and they fold to form the active or the functional insulin molecule. So, the large single chain precursor in the case of insulin then gets converted to a functional molecule which contains the A chain and the B chain, which are linked by disulfide bridges, and they are done by certain proteases which clips certain segments of the protein connecting the two chains. Similarly, collagen is synthesized as procollagen. Now, 3-procollagen polypeptide chain will align themselves. Then, as a post-translation modification, you find certain enzymes which carry out the oxidation and hydroxylation of certain amino acid residues present in the procollagen molecules. They provide cross-links for greater stability. Amino terminal peptides are then cleaved to form the final collagen molecule. Now, I told you it could be done by attachment of certain molecules. So, these are covalent modifications that we see, like phosphorylation. Phosphorylation of the hydroxyl groups of serine or threonine amino acids, and less frequently tyrosine, is brought about by protein kinases. This phosphorylation can be reversed by protein phosphatases, and this can increase or decrease the activity of proteins or enzymes. The classical example is that of glycogen synthetase or phosphorylase, which brings about glycogen synthesis, and the phosphorylase which brings about the glycogen degradation. Second type of covalent alteration is glycosylation. So, proteins which form part of cell membranes or lysosomes have carbohydrate residues which are attached to serine or threonine. So, they are O-linked with these amino acids which contain hydroxyl groups, or asparagine where it is N-linked because they contain an amino group. And such proteins occurs mainly in the endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus, and this glycosylation is used to target proteins to specific organelles. Hydroxylation, as I told you, the proline and the lysine residues of the procollagen molecule gets hydroxylated which increases the cross-linking, which helps in forming a very stable matrix of the collagen molecule. And this hydroxylation process occurs in the endoplasmic reticulum. Certain other typical covalent modifications that we see is in the case of vitamin biotin, which must be bound to the carboxylase enzyme for its functional activity. Secondly, in the case of vitamin K, which the vitamin K is dependent on gamma carboxylation of glutamate, and this is the gamma carboxylation of glutamate facilitated by vitamin K is essential for blood clotting proteins. Also, certain modifications, that is attachment of lipids to certain proteins, can help in anchoring these proteins. So certain anchoring of proteins require attachment of lipids, and these are certain typical things which we see in the case of proteins, typical modifications that we see in the case of proteins. Now the last part of this is the protein degradation. So proteins, what happens to proteins which are defective or they are destined, what happens to these proteins that they are destined for rapid turnover? So these are marked by for destruction by attachment of a small protein called ubiquitin. Okay, so defective proteins are marked for degradation by attachment of a protein which is known as ubiquitin. Okay, so this attachment of ubiquitin is facilitated by the hydrolysis of ATP. So once this is tagged with ubiquitin, these proteins are recognized rapidly by a cellular component which is known as proteasome. This is an ATP dependent process. Again, ATP is hydrolyzed, and this proteolytic system then converts this protein molecule, this peptide chain, which is defective, it is converted to its constituent amino acids. So this completes the process of translation. That is, we looked through the different steps of translation, and after that we looked at the inhibitors of protein synthesis and the post-translational modifications that a protein undergoes. Thank you.